Good afternoon, everybody. I thought it'd be nice to have our reflection today in the baptistry, the old baptistry of the church here, because behind me are the names of people on our November dead list, of your relatives who you've asked to be remembered, in particular during this month of November, and of course during the year at Masses when you see November dead list. And most of them are said here, but some are said by Father Michael in Nigeria, and he's very happy to do that, to remember our friends. So that's why I'm sitting here today. It is November, and if this lockdown continues, which it appears that it will, you will not necessarily, unless you come for private prayer, get the opportunity to look at the dead list that people often want to do, and then, to see your family's names and so on that you've asked for. We remember them all, of course. During these last few months, some new expressions have found their way into our language. Some which were there before but didn't have the significance, others that are completely new. So COVID-19 is the most obvious, or coronavirus. No one ever heard of that before. But then there are things like self-isolation, R numbers, tiers 1 to 3, levels 1 to 5, even the word pandemic, which we always thought of as something somewhere else, is now very much part of our vocabulary. But that's not all. There are other expressions that have crept into our ecclesiastical life. I've got a very nice friend here called Bernard who each day gets a copy of the Irish paper, and when he's ready it puts it through my letterbox, and it's nice to be able to see what's happening in my home country, see what's happening to my rugby team Munster, and the hurling team of Limerick, where I come from, and hearing a bit about Irish politics, which is in somewhat of a disarray, and you often get a little gem here and there of an article about this or that or the other. And last week I read an article about an expression that has come into the Irish psyche, and that expression is mass hopping. Mass hopping. Now that doesn't mean lots of people jumping about the place, as in mass hopping. It's to do with watching mass on the internet, which has now become very much part of our lives. This is a YouTube broadcast. You will see it. It's now 11:15 in the morning. You will see this later in the afternoon and can look at it any other time afterwards. The same applies with the Mass at the weekend, which is recorded on Saturday and is available on Sunday. There's also live streaming, which people can have live, and we've done some very good work at St Martin's School in the last 2 or 3 weeks, where we've had a Mass on St Martin's Day in the chapel with one class of young people, which was live streamed to all the classes so they could all take part. And then last week we had a remembrance service under the same thing, and in fact the head and chaplain have decided that each week now there will be an assembly for the whole school from the chapel at 3 o'clock live stream. So technology sometimes works to our advantage, even if you're a technophobe like me. At this moment, Mark is outside trying to fiddle with my phone so that I don't have to keep paying vast sums of money to them, which they seem to put up during the lockdown period when you're a pay-as-you-go person. So, excuse me. So we've got into this thing, but what's happened, of course, is now that you can see Mass all over the world. And this, in a way, is a good thing, especially for people who are living among us who come from another country. So they can see Mass from their own country. They can see, I've heard people watching Mass in America, in Australia, in India in particular, and some parts of Europe. It means that you can even be possibly in your home parish where you came from. And that must be a very powerful and comforting thing at this time, to be able to be as if you were in that church with your family and friends. There is also The other side of it, which where the expression comes from, is choosing your preference. If you don't particularly like Mass in one place, you can always go somewhere else. Of course, that's been part of our tradition for a while. People have often, if they find the celebration of Mass in their own parish something that they can't cope with, they find themselves elsewhere. So for many years there were refugees from this parish who found their way to Earl Shilton, for example. And as Father Terry used to say, if you want to know the truth of your faith, stay well away from Hinckley. And of course some of them took him at his word. Imagine the shock, therefore, on the first weekend in November in 2016, when the person they were trying to escape from turned up as their parish priest in Earl Shilton. There are now people, apparently, who have taken the huge step psychologically of crossing the road and have popped up in Nuneaton, I believe, during this time. But it's a bit like that, and sometimes people have a preference for one form of Mass or another, and that can be a problem. In Ireland it's become a big problem because many priests, particularly older priests like me, are feeling devalued, when their parishioners are not joining them either live or YouTube for Mass, when they're seeking their spiritual nourishment elsewhere. It's made a lot of the priests quite downhearted, even depressed, thinking that they are no longer good enough for their people. And there is something there is something about it. We've always had, and certainly in the last many years, a disease called cafeteria Catholicism. It's not just to do with where you go to Mass, excuse me, but it's also to do with choosing the bits of the teaching that suit you and ignoring the ones that don't. And that's what we call it, picking and choosing, like being in a cafeteria. And so there's always been that. But if a priest is celebrating the Mass or trying to look after his people and there is quite overt opposition to him, that can be very difficult. I remember when Father John St. John was here, he was kind of hypersensitive to that sort of thing, and he said to me, Frank, he said, there's lots of people in this parish who don't like you. And I said, well, that's good. He said, what do you mean? He said, it means I'm doing my job. I was doing my job. I'm trying my best, and some of the things that you say to them don't go down too well. And one of the greatest problems in this part of the world is nobody likes change, anything to change. And so when they do, the person who is seen as effecting that change is the person who gets on the butt of their anger and so on. And I think also during the lockdown period, a lot more people have become angry and complaining and irritable. Somebody was on the phone to Marina there recently complaining about me, saying I was wearing my mask upside down. And you think to yourself, these people need to get a life. No priest is there to cultivate his own personality. Of course, we have personalities, yes we do. Sometimes it's difficult for people to take, yes, that's right. And it works the other way too. The Lord sent me here to love you, and I do, and I even like many of you. But you can't just like everyone. But it isn't important. That's the point. It's not important. There will be people who complain, and in Bishop's house there is a rather thick folder of complaints against me, I know that. Whether it's to do with how you celebrate the Mass or how you treat people and so on. You do the best you can, and I'm not in the business of cultivating my personality. I really don't care what anybody thinks. I'm very blessed. I've got lots of friends, including people in this parish. Many, many friends. I think of all of you as my friends. And I don't worry about it. It's not important. What's important is not what they think about me, it's what they think about our Lord. And so when you get people, saying nice things to you, sometimes it's very embarrassing and you wish they wouldn't. although it's good to have a reassurance. It's a funny sort of balance, isn't it? It's a funny balance about that. But we're not here to cultivate our personality. We're here to cultivate the Lord's personality and to lead you to a life with him, or to foster the life that you have with him already. And so sometimes just mass hopping is not a good thing. In Ireland, where I come from, I mean, it's been a problem for years, this kind of picking and choosing. And this might sound very absurd to you, but it's absolutely true. But the value of a priest like me in a place like Ireland would have been on one matter and one matter only, namely, how long does it take me to say Mass? Oh, it's great in 17 minutes, you know. And there's this peculiar thing about wanting to get in and out of Mass as quickly as possible. And some people staying outside and coming in after the homily and going out during communion and saying that they had got Mass. It's peculiar, isn't it? Very peculiar. Sometimes feel that, you know, it won't be long before we have an appraisal, which seems to be happening anyway, you know, so I might be having my ecclesiastical Ofsted, you know, outstanding, good, satisfactory, or requiring improvement, and I know which of those would be for me, and I'm very happy to have the fourth one, requiring improvement, because I do and all of us do. We might be given numbers out of 10 like the footballers or the rugby players at the weekend on the paper, you know, 6 out of 10 and so on. But we need to kind of unpick this, and particularly in a place like Ireland, where you think, what sort of faith is it that is more anxious about the length of time that the Mass takes than what the Mass represents? It's always been with me. Father Michael was telling me before he went back that, you know, some parts of Nigeria the Mass goes on for hours and they expect it. He said his bishop talks for a long time at the beginning of Mass, then at the homily, and then at the end. He said, we're lucky to get out in 2 hours. Well, he would last about an hour in Ireland, I should think, trying to do that. But you need to unpick this. What are people saying by going from, you know, one church to another, or thinking that it should be quicker, or it should be entertaining, it should be... I am not an ecclesiastical Bruce Forsyth. I'm not here to entertain people. What priest is there for is to lead you in prayer, and that it's the prayer of the community, not the prayer of the priest, that is significant. Some clergy are inclined to forget this when they sort of say Mass, and then other people say, well, you know, it's not exciting enough or dramatic enough. Underneath all of this is a huge problem, and the problem is me. It's about me, not me personally, but all of us. Because if we say that our spiritual life, and especially our life with celebrating the Mass, is about what it makes me feel, or what I get out of it, or why God doesn't answer my prayers, there's something very wrong. I remember when we did that play there a couple of years ago, which I wrote some time ago, called Everything Except Temptation. And all these plays that we do are meant to have a message for people, in case you didn't know. Yes, they're meant to entertain, but through the entertainment they give you the message. And there was this scene where the tempters were in a church, sitting behind people sitting in the church, and they were muttering things into them, saying, oh God, this is so boring, I don't know why I come here. You know, I could be doing so many other things like shopping, and I've got to get the kids to rugby or dance, and I don't think I'll come here again. No, I don't think I will, and it was all to do with... But that's what's in people's minds. It might be in your minds when you're here on a Sunday morning or Saturday evening. It might be, for all I know, don't know. But there's something not right with the spiritual life that is based on me and my emotions, my feelings, my preferences. An old book about prayer said the point of prayer is not the effect it has on me, but the effect it has on Almighty God. And we come to Mass because Jesus asked us. We don't come here to make ourselves feel good. And I think there is another thing which we don't talk about too much. It's about us. The Eucharist is not about me, it's about us. It's about the people who are with you, sitting near you. It's about what's happening to them, for good or ill. Some of those people might be here on a Sunday morning with a huge sense of loss or bereavement if their husband or wife has died, or parents, or even children, especially if this has happened suddenly. And they might be sitting near you and you don't know. There might be people who have lost their jobs, or worried about losing their jobs, or worried about the future of their children, or worried about the effects of the pandemic, who've struggled to get themselves there. There might be people who, we have to say it and say it very carefully, who are not encouraged by other members of their family to come to Mass, and have to state their case, if you like, and make a sacrifice to do so. There may be people who have got the beginnings of dementia when they feel a bit confused, or a cancer has come back, or they're not breathing as well as they were, or they've looked after a husband or wife or parent for a long time, and now that parent is gone. People say there's not enough drama in it. There's plenty of drama, but you can't see it. And there will be people who struggle to keep believing, who find a lot of their faith is eroded, but something brings them here on a Sunday morning. And it may be the fact that you're sitting next to them that says to them, I can go on. I'm struggling, but all these other people aren't. For all you know, they might all be thinking the same thing. And that they might be coming to seek reassurance, even by the physical presence of another person. And that's why the Eucharist in our own community is so important. It's so important. And that we can somehow move away from this personalised attitude, which depends on the personality of the celebrant, how he makes me feel, and we can move away from our own thoughts and our own feelings and think about loving and honouring God. Much of what we do in loving another person, in honouring another person, is done in a most mundane matter, every day, cooking meals, going out to work, looking after someone who's poorly. And it's done without question, it's done almost without thought. And our prayer is sometimes like that we do it without question and without thought. There are times when it's good to think about it and why we do it, and other times when we just get on with it. And that's maybe what brings you out of your home on a Saturday evening, Sunday morning, or during the week to this church or any church. And the last thing is, this is a personal matter. Your priest, whoever or however he is, knows you. I read an article in the Tablet many, many years ago, and it was one of those articles that led you up the garden path. And it said, I don't know why I keep going to church. This priest is old and boring. The place is cold. There's no seeming welcome. And I don't understand what he's saying to me half the time. And I'm just wondering why I should keep doing it. And you go reading that thinking, well, I feel like that myself, And then it says, but it's the Mass. It's the prayer of the Mass. irrespective of who's celebrating and how old or boring or whatever he is. It's the Mass. And your priest knows you. He stands in front of you on a Sunday morning, he looks at you. And what he sees in front of him is a little delight, but a lot of pain. Because he's been there with you during that pain. And he knows what's going on in your mind because you've told him. And as your priest is standing in front of you, looking at you, what he's doing is bringing you and all that pain, and the delight too, of course, into the prayer of the Mass. So when the bread and wine is offered, the priest is offering not only himself, but also all of you, because he knows you. And he knows what that offering should mean. The purpose of our celebrating the Mass as a community is to be together with the Lord. And the reason, above all else, is very simple. It's written in stone on this altar in front of me. The reason we're here, the reason we look at it on television when we can't be here, is do this in memory of me. Do this in memory of me.